Hello there, and welcome to History, to Fall Asleep. Tonight, we are following one of the quietest and most remarkable threads in human history. It crosses deserts that glow silver beneath the moon, climbs through high passes where the air grows thin, follows rivers through farming towns, and reaches ports where wooden ships wait for the seasonal winds. We call this vast web of journeys the Silk Road. But it was never really one road. It was many roads, many trails, many rivers, and many sea lanes. It was a patient network made by people who carried small bundles, led animals, translated languages, repaired wheels, counted coins, copied texts, prepared food, and looked for the next safe place to rest. Along these routes, silk traveled, but so did paper, music, stories, religions, designs, foods, tools, and ways of looking at the world. A merchant might only know one stretch of the journey. A pilgrim might travel more slowly than a caravan. A family in an oasis town might meet travelers from places they would never see themselves. Yet each small exchange helped join distant communities together. As you listen, there is no need to remember every date or every name. Let the facts arrive gently, then drift away again. Imagine a lantern at the edge of a caravan camp. Imagine soft footsteps in sand. Imagine a bolt of cloth folded carefully into a wooden chest. Let the long roads of the past become quiet paths for your thoughts to follow. If these slow historical journeys help you rest, you are welcome to subscribe to History to Fall Asleep. But for now, settle into a comfortable position. Let your shoulders become heavy. Let the day move farther away. And let us begin our gentle journey along the Silk Roads. Fact 1. The Silk Road was never a single road. The name makes it sound like one long path running neatly from one end of Asia to another. In reality, the Silk Roads were a loose web of routes. Some crossed dry plains. Some followed river valleys. Some curved around deserts. Others crossed the sea. Travelers chose different paths depending on weather, local politics, and money, animals, and the news they heard at the last market town. This made the network flexible. When one route became difficult, another might become useful. The Silk Roads were less like a straight line on a map, and more like a woven fabric, made from many threads that met, separated, and met again. Let that thought settle for a moment, like dust returning gently to the ground after a caravan has passed. For a few seconds, imagine the road empty again, with one faraway lantern holding its small circle of warmth against the dark. Fact 2. The Silk Roads connected land routes and sea routes. Many people picture only camels moving over sand, but ships were just as important. Maritime routes linked ports in East Asia, Southeast Asia, South Asia, the Persian Gulf, the Red Sea, and the Mediterranean world. Sea travel could carry heavy cargo in larger quantities, while inland routes connected towns that ships could not reach. A traveler might move by boat for part of a journey, by river craft for another part, and by pack animal after that. The land and sea networks supported each other. Together, They made a wide system of exchange across Eurasia and beyond. Picture the route growing quiet again, with only the soft clink of a harness somewhere beyond the firelight. Let the scene become still, as though the travelers have stopped speaking and only the soft breathing of the animals remains. Fact 3. The phrase Silk Road is surprisingly modern. The routes themselves are ancient, but the label is not. The phrase was popularized in the 19th century by the German geographer Ferdinand Dunhuang. For most of the long history of these journeys, people did not wake up and say they were traveling on the Silk Road. They knew particular roads, passes, markets, kingdoms, ports, and rivers. The modern name is still useful, but it can hide how many different peoples shaped the network. Remembering that the label came later helps us see the past with a little more care. Now, allow the image to fade a little, leaving only a broad sky and a slow road beneath it. Picture the path continuing beyond sight, patient and pale beneath the moon, with no need for you to follow it any farther tonight. Fact 4. Long-distance exchange grew in stages. Trade between neighboring communities is much older than any famous Silk Road story. Over time, smaller local exchanges became connected to wider networks. A craftsperson might sell an object to a local trader. That trader might carry it to a larger town. Another merchant might take it farther away. By the time an item reached a distant city, it may have passed through many hands. The vast network did not appear all at once. It grew gradually as travel knowledge, political alliances, markets and demand made more distant journeys worthwhile. Take an easy breath and imagine the next traveler arriving at a distant gate before dawn. Rest beside this idea for a moment, like a traveler resting beside a wall after a long day of quiet, steady walking. Fact 5. Most merchants did not travel from one end of Eurasia to the other. A single traveler crossing the whole continent makes a dramatic story. But it was not the usual pattern. Many merchants specialized in one region. They knew where to find water, which local officials collected taxes, and which customers trusted their goods. At a large market, cargo could be sold, repacked, and handed to someone else. In this way, objects moved enormous distances, even when the people carrying them traveled only part of the way. The Silk Roads depended on cooperation between many local experts, not only on a few legendary adventurers. Let the old road rest in your mind, not as a line to memorize, but as a path disappearing calmly into the distance. Imagine a gentle wind moving across the sand and carrying away every detail you do not need to remember before sleep. Fact 6. High-value goods were especially suited to long journeys. Moving cargo across mountains and deserts took time, food, animals, labor, and patience. For this reason, small objects with high value were especially attractive to merchants. Fine textiles, precious stones, rare dyes, spices, glassware, metals, and carefully made tools could be carried more easily than bulky everyday goods. This did not mean that only luxuries traveled. Foodstuffs and raw materials also moved through regional networks. But a lightweight object that could be sold for a good price had a special advantage when every extra load made a journey harder. Somewhere in that world, a lamp is being covered against the wind and a journey is beginning again. Somewhere beyond the next ridge, a small camp is settling down and its distant fire is becoming only a warm point of light. Fact 7. Pack animals made the overland routes possible. Human beings walked many parts of the Silk Roads, but they did not travel alone. Camels, horses, mules, donkeys, oxen, and yaks carried goods across different landscapes. Each animal had strengths. Camels handled dry regions well. Horses were useful for speed and prestige. Mules and donkeys worked steadily on many kinds of paths. Yaks were adapted to high mountain environments. A caravan was not simply a line of animals. It was a moving system of care. People had to think about feed, water, saddles, injuries, weather, and the pace of the group. Imagine the sound of footsteps becoming softer as the caravan moved farther away across the plain. Allow the old route to widen, in your mind, peaceful and unhurried, with room for every traveler and every quiet pause. Fact 8. Bactrian camels became icons of Central Asian travel. The two-humped Bactrian camel was especially well suited to parts of Central Asia. Its broad feet helped it move over loose ground, and its thick coat helped it tolerate cold as well as dry conditions. Sculptures, paintings, and textiles from Silk Roads communities often show camels carrying packs or carrying musicians and riders. The camel became a symbol of long-distance travel because its slow, steady movement matched the rhythm of the routes. It was not a magical creature that made travel easy. It was a hard-working companion in a difficult landscape. Let the horizon remain open and quiet, with no need to hurry toward whatever lies beyond it. Picture a folded blanket, a covered lamp, and a clear night sky, all waiting patiently beside the next stage of the journey. Fact 9. Deserts were not empty spaces. On a map, a desert can look blank. For travelers, it was full of decisions. There were wells, dunes, dry riverbeds, wind patterns, old tracks, watch posts, abandoned settlements, and places where a small mistake could become serious. Desert routes often ran from one water source to another rather than across the exact center of the sand. People who lived near these areas possessed valuable knowledge about safe travel. The desert was not simply a barrier between civilizations. It was also a place where communities, guides, and trading stations helped make movement possible. Pause beside an imagined well, where animals drink slowly and the water reflects a small piece of sky. Let the road grow softer now, like a line drawn in sand that the evening wind will slowly smooth away. Fact 10. Oasis towns were the quiet heart of the routes. An oasis was more than a patch of green beside a desert. It could be a place where water allowed gardens, fields, workshops, homes, and markets to exist. Travelers came there to rest animals, repair equipment, buy food, hear news, and meet people from other regions. Oases became important because they offered a pause between difficult stretches of travel. In some Places. Wealthy merchants built homes and supported religious or civic buildings. The Silk Roads were often remembered through their grand distances, but they depend on these smaller places of shelter and renewal. Picture a folded piece of cloth resting safely in a chest while the night grows cooler outside. Imagine the sound of a wooden gate closing gently as a caravan town becomes quiet for the night. Fact 11. Water decided where many roads could go. A route might look direct on a map, yet no traveler could follow it without reliable water. Springs, rivers, snowmelt, wells, and irrigation channels shaped the practical geography of trade. A town with water could become a stopping place. A drought could make a route less attractive. A new canal could change the value of nearby land. Travelers, therefore, watched the landscape carefully. The Silk Roads were not only about political borders and commercial ambition, Sogdians. They were also about the ordinary but essential question of where the next drink of water could be found. Allow the route to become still for a moment, as if everyone has paused to listen to the wind. Take a slow breath and picture cool water in a clay cup, offered without hurry after a long stretch of road. Fact 12. Mountain passes linked worlds that seemed far apart. The high ranges of Central and South Asia were formidable, but they were not solid walls. Passes allowed people, animals, languages, and goods to move between valleys. These crossings could be dangerous because of snow, steep paths, cold winds, and thin air. Yet they also created connections between regions that would otherwise feel isolated. A mountain pass could become famous because of the goods that moved through it, the armies that crossed it, or the pilgrims who used it. In the quietest sense, every pass was a narrow doorway between different worlds. Think of a distant town settling into evening, its market noise fading behind mud brick walls. Let the fact drift away at its own pace, leaving only stars, dark hills, and the feeling of distant travel. Fact 13. The geography of the routes was extremely varied. The Silk Roads crossed some of the most dramatic environments in the world. Travelers encountered salt flats, forests, grasslands, rivers, deserts, alpine lakes, fertile valleys, and high mountain country. This variety meant there was no single kind of Silk Road traveler. Someone skilled in desert travel might need help in snowy terrain. A boatman understood currents that a camel driver did not. A merchant could learn to respect many landscapes because each demanded different habits. The routes teach a simple lesson. Long-distance exchange was never separate from geography. The land itself shaped every journey. Let the road curve gently away now, carrying the story onward at its own unhurried pace. Imagine a low conversation fading into silence as travelers prepare to sleep beside their packed goods. Fact 14. Shangxian's mission helped widen Han China's Western contacts. In the 2nd century BCE, the Han court sent Zhang Qian southward on a diplomatic mission. His journey was not originally a merchant expedition. He was sent to seek alliances against powerful rivals. The mission was difficult, and he spent years away from home. Yet the information he brought back helped the Han court understand more about the regions beyond China's western frontier. His story is often connected with the early growth of routes between Han China and Central Asia. It reminds us that diplomacy, curiosity, and trade were often intertwined. Imagine a traveler looking up at familiar stars and feeling for a moment less far from home. Rest with the thought that the world can be large and connected at the same time, like a sky full of separate stars. Fact 15. Diplomacy and trade often traveled together. A merchant needed safety, predictable rules, and access to markets. Rulers wanted information, prestige goods, alliances, and sometimes horses or raw materials. Because of this, diplomatic envoys and commercial travelers often move through the same broad corridors. Gifts could carry political meaning. A fine textile, an unusual animal, or a crafted vessel could say something about wealth and respect. Trade was not separate from power. At the same time, politics could not fully control the movement of ideas and objects. People continued to make connections in the spaces between great courts and capitals. Rest with the idea that even a long journey is made from small, quiet steps. Picture a quiet road through an oasis garden where leaves move softly and the air feels cooler than the desert beyond. Fact 16. Silk gave the network its most famous name. Silk was prized because it was beautiful, light, strong, and difficult to make well. It could be dyed, patterned, embroidered, and folded into a small package. In China, silk became associated with prestige, ceremony, and state power. Beyond China, it attracted buyers who valued both its appearance and its rarity. Yet silk was only one part of the story. The name Silk Road is memorable, but the routes also carried countless other goods and ideas. A road named after one fabric became a symbol for a much larger world of exchange. Picture a camel kneeling beside a camp while someone loosens a strap with careful hands. Allow the story to pause here, like a caravan waiting for dawn before it begins the next careful stage. Fact 17. Silk begins with the work of silkworms. Sericulture, the cultivation of silkworms for silk, required detailed knowledge and careful timing. Silkworms feed on mulberry leaves and spin cocoons from a fine protein fiber. Turning those cocoons into usable thread was skilled work. It required attention to heat, water, winding, weaving, and dyeing. The finished fabric could look effortless, but it represented many patient steps. This is one of the calming truths behind the Silk Roads. Even the most famous luxury product began with small living creatures, leaves on trees, and the careful hands of people at work. Breathe here between one town and the next, between one voice and another. Imagine a traveler looking back once at the lights of a town, then turning calmly toward the open road. Fact 18. Silk was also a form of value. In different periods and places, silk could do more than become clothing. It could be used in gifts, rewards, and exchanges between courts and communities. Fine bolts of fabric were portable and recognizable, which made them useful in a world where money took many forms. Silk could signal status, mark ceremony, or help secure a relationship. The fabric carried value partly because of its beauty and partly because of the labor inside it. When a merchant packed silk for travel, they were not only carrying cloth, they were carrying concentrated work, skill, and trust. Imagine a river moving beside the road, carrying moonlight downstream without any effort at all. Let the distant route become a gentle background to your thoughts. Wide, dark, and completely without urgency. Fact 19. Horses were among the most desired goods. Powerful states often needed strong horses for transport, communication, hunting, and warfare. Some regions of Central Asia were famous for horses that impressed rulers in distant capitals. The desire for horses encouraged diplomatic missions and trade relationships. In Tang, China, for example, silk could be exchanged for horses from the West. This exchange sounds simple, but it linked animal breeding, military needs, taxation, and long-distance commerce. A horse on a Silk Road route was not merely an animal. It could become a gift, a source of prestige, a practical necessity, or a reason for a ruler to look beyond their frontier. Allow the details to become softer now, as though seen through the warm glow of a lantern. Picture a small oil lamp burning steadily inside a sheltered room while the night wind passes outside. Fact 20. Jade traveled through long networks of exchange. Jade was valued in several ancient societies for its beauty, durability, and symbolic meaning. In China, certain kinds of jade were especially prized, and regions such as Khotan in the Tarim Basin became important sources of nephrite. Raw stone and finished objects could move along routes that connected mining areas, workshops, markets, and elite patrons. A small, polished piece of jade might travel much farther than the people who first shaped it imagined. Like silk, jade shows how a rare material could tie a distant landscape to the rituals and aesthetics of another place. Somewhere along the route, a door closes gently for the night, and the road becomes peaceful. For now, leave the maps folded and the animals resting. The next road can wait until another page of history. Fact 21. Glass was another traveler on the routes. Glassware fascinated people because it could catch light, hold color, and take delicate shapes. Glass-making traditions developed in several regions, and objects or techniques moved through exchange networks. A cup, bead, bottle, or small ornament could travel across many communities. In some places, imported glass inspired local craftspeople to experiment with their own methods. This is one of the recurring patterns of the Silk Roads. An object did not only arrive as a finished thing, it could also arrive as an idea, inviting someone new to adapt its form, color, or technique. Picture a map with no sharp edges, only many paths meeting and separating like threads. Imagine the dust settling around old footprints, preserving nothing sharply and yet leaving the path quietly visible. Fact 22. Textile patterns moved as well as textiles. A piece of cloth could carry more than thread. It could carry flowers, animals, roundels, riders, trees, and symbols from far away. When weavers encountered new patterns, they sometimes borrowed, transformed, or combined them with local traditions. The result could be a fabric that looked familiar and foreign at the same time. This quiet blending can be seen in textiles connected with Central Asia, China, Persia, India, and the Mediterranean world. The Silk Roads were not a machine that made every culture identical. They were a place where artists found new possibilities. Let the dust settle, the animals rest, and the distant road wait quietly for morning. Let your mind travel only as far as it wishes, then stop beside a peaceful camp beneath the stars. Fact 23. Spices were part of a wider story of maritime trade. Many spices moved most efficiently by sea, especially through the Indian Ocean networks. Pepper, aromatic woods, and other valuable goods could pass through ports and then continue inland. The maritime and overland routes met in commercial centers, where cargo was unloaded, repacked, taxed, sold, and sent onward. This is why it is useful to imagine the Silk Roads as a combined silum rather than a camel path alone. A spice carried by ship might later be bought in an inland market. A silk textile carried overland might eventually reach a coastal city and continue by sea. Imagine a small courtyard where travelers speak in low voices before sleep. Picture a silent river carrying moonlight past an old trading town, moving onward without being asked. Fact 24. Food moved with people. Travelers did not only carry finished luxury goods, they also carried seeds, recipes, techniques, and preferences. Grapes, melons, pomegranates, walnuts, and many other foods became part of long stories of cultivation and exchange across Eurasia. A food could change as it entered a new region. Farmers adapted it to local water, soil, and seasons. Cooks paired it with local ingredients. Over generations, something once associated with a distant land could become ordinary in a new home. The Silk Roads remind us that dinner tables can preserve the memory of very old journeys. Take a slow breath and leave a little space around the fact, like open land around a caravan trail. Rest in the pause between places where the road is neither behind nor ahead, but simply quiet beneath the night. Fact 25. Paper changed the speed of ideas. Paper was one of the most influential materials to move through the broad Silk Road's world. It was lighter and often more practical than many older writing surfaces. Paper supported letters, account books, religious texts, drawings, government records, and learning. As paper-making knowledge spread and developed in different places, it helped information travel in new ways. A sheet of paper seems quiet and simple, but it can carry a voice across distance and time. In the history of exchange, paper was one of the gentlest and most powerful travelers. Let the night sky widen over the old routes, holding every road in the same soft darkness. Imagine the caravan far away now, its lanterns small and warm until they blend gently into the dark horizon. Fact 26. Printing followed paper as a major innovation. The story of printing is complex, with different techniques developing across regions and periods towards. But paper created the practical surface that made many forms of copying and printing more useful. Texts could be reproduced, studied, stored, and shared in larger numbers. Along the Silk Roads, knowledge did not move only through spoken stories or precious manuscripts. It also moved through technologies that made written communication more accessible. The spread of ideas was never automatic. It depended on teachers, translators, readers, and institutions. Still, paper and printing widened the possibilities of memory. Let that thought settle for a moment, like dust returning gently to the ground after a caravan has passed. For a few seconds, imagine the road empty again, with one faraway lantern holding its small circle of warmth against the dark. Fact 27. The Sogdians became famous as skilled merchants. The Sogdians were an Iranian people whose homeland lay in Central Asia, especially in areas of present-day Uzbekistan and Tajikistan. Between roughly the 4th and 8th centuries CE, Sogdian merchants became particularly important in Silk Road's exchange. They were mobile, multilingual, and experienced in connecting distant markets. Their influence did not come only from buying and selling. They also helped move artistic styles, religious ideas, languages, and customs. In a network of many communities, people who could communicate across differences were especially valuable. The Sogdians became some of the most effective connectors of their age. Picture the route growing quiet, again, with only the soft clink of a harness somewhere beyond the firelight. Let the scene become still, as though the travelers have stopped speaking, and only the soft breathing of the animals remains. Fact 28. Sogdiana was built around oasis cities and fertile land. Sogdiana was not simply a place between other empires. It had its own towns, farms, artistic traditions, and commercial life. Irrigation supported agriculture, while oasis settlements became centers of craft and exchange. The region benefited from being located near several important routes. This position brought opportunity, but it also meant that Sogdian communities had to respond to changing powers around them. Their history shows that Central Asia was not an empty corridor between East and West. It was a center in its own right, full of people who shaped the movement of goods and ideas. Now allow the image to fade a little, leaving only a broad sky and a slow road beneath it. Picture the path continuing beyond sight, patient and pale beneath the moon, with no need for you to follow it any farther tonight. Fact 29. Samarkand became one of the great cities of Central Asia. Samarkand is remembered as a major center of urban life, trade, and learning across many centuries. Its location made it important to people moving through Central Asia, and its markets connected it to a wide range of regions. The city changed under different rulers, languages, and religions, yet it remained a place where people met and exchanged information. To imagine Samarkand in the Silk Roads era is to imagine busy streets, workshops, gardens, storage rooms, guest houses, and conversations in more than one language. Great cities grow from many small, repeated meetings. Take an easy breath and imagine the next traveler arriving at a distant gate before dawn. Rest beside this idea for a moment, like a traveler resting beside a wall after a long day of quiet, steady walking. Fact 30. Merchant communities could live far from home. Trade did not always involve a traveler who returned quickly to the same village. Some merchants settled for years or generations in towns far from their place of origin. They formed communities, built relationships, and sometimes maintained ties with relatives or partners elsewhere. These communities made trade easier because they could offer language skills, local knowledge, introductions, and trust. A distant city could contain a small neighborhood of people whose family roots lay hundreds or thousands of kilometers away. The Silk Roads were therefore not only about movement, they were also about new homes made beside old roads. Let the old road rest in your mind, not as a line to memorize, but as a path disappearing calmly into the distance. Imagine a gentle wind moving across the sand and carrying away every detail you do not need to remember before sleep. Fact 31. Languages multiplied at Silk Road's markets. In a busy market town, people might hear local languages, regional trade languages, court languages, religious languages, and the speech of passing travelers. Communication required patience. Some people learned several languages. Others relied on interpreters, gestures, written notes, repeated phrases, or trusted partners. This linguistic variety could make travel difficult, but it also created opportunities. A person who could explain, translate, or bargain across languages had a useful skill. The Silk Roads show that language is not only a boundary. It can also be a bridge built word by word. Somewhere in that world, a lamp is being covered against the wind, and a journey is beginning again. Somewhere beyond the next ridge, a small camp is settling down, and its distant fire is becoming only a warm point of light. Fact 32. Writing systems traveled with people and institutions. Scripts and written languages appeared on contracts, letters, official records, religious texts, labels, and personal notes. In places where several communities met, different scripts could exist side by side. A traveler might carry a letter written in one language to someone who needed another person to read it. Over time, writing traditions influenced each other through borrowing, translation, and adaptation. The written remains from Silk Road sites are precious because they preserve small moments of ordinary life. A receipt, a list, or a short message can reveal that someone was trying to solve the same practical problems people still face today. Imagine the sound of footsteps coming softer as the caravan moves farther away across the plain. Allow the old route to widen in your mind, peaceful and unhurried, with room for every traveler and every quiet pause. Fact 30. 3. Letters reveal the human side of long-distance trade. Some surviving letters from Silk Road's communities show that merchants worried about payments, deliveries, family news, and uncertain journeys. These messages are a reminder that trade was not an abstract force. It was made by people waiting for replies. A letter could travel slowly, be delayed by weather, or never arrive at all. Someone writing from a faraway town might ask about a missing shipment or send greetings to relatives. The details may feel familiar. Across centuries, people still hoped that a message would reach the person who needed it. Let the horizon remain open and quiet, with no need to hurry toward whatever lies beyond it. Picture a folded blanket, a covered lamp, and a clear night sky, all waiting patiently beside the next stage of the journey. Fact 34. Translators were essential to the network. A translator could make a market transaction possible, help a pilgrim understand a text, guide an envoy through a foreign court, or allow a new idea to be explained in a local language. Translation was not simple word replacement. It required judgment about meaning, custom, tone, and context. Religious texts especially needed careful translation, because a single term could carry deep significance. Along the Silk Roads, translators helped ideas survive the journey from one culture to another. They were often quiet figures in history, but their work shaped what later generations could understand. Pause beside an imagined well, where animals drink slowly, and the water reflects a small piece of sky. Let the road grow softer now, like a line drawn in sand that the evening wind will slowly smooth away. Fact 35. Buddhism traveled through many hands and many languages. Buddhism moved from South Asia into Central Asia, China, Tibet, Korea, Japan, and other regions. Through a long process involving monks, pilgrims, patrons, translators, and local communities. The Silk Roads helped support this movement, but no single caravan simply carried a finished religion from one place to another. Teachings were translated, images were adapted, monasteries were built, and local traditions shaped how Buddhism was understood. The result was a rich diversity of Buddhist cultures. The journey of Buddhism along these routes is one of the clearest examples of how ideas change, while still carrying a connection to their earlier forms. Picture a folded piece of cloth resting safely in a chest, while the night grows cooler outside. Imagine the sound of a wooden gate closing gently as a caravan comes quiet for the night. Fact 36. Gandhara became an important meeting place of cultures. The region known as Gandhara, in parts of present-day Pakistan and Afghanistan, stood near major routes linking South Asia, Central Asia, and the wider world. It became known for Buddhist art that combined local traditions with influences connected to Hellenistic and other artistic worlds. Halls. Sculptures from Gandhara often show careful drapery and expressive forms. These artworks are not proof that one culture replaced another. They show artists working in a connected environment, using more than one visual language. Gandhara reminds us that borderlands can become creative centers rather than mere edges. Allow the route to become still for a moment, as if everyone has paused to listen to the wind. Take a slow breath and picture cool water in a clay cup, offered without hurry after a long stretch of road. Fact 37. Oasis monasteries gave travelers places to pause. In parts of Central Asia, Buddhist centers developed near oasis towns and travel corridors. These places could serve religious communities while also supporting travelers, donors, and the circulation of texts and art. A monastery might contain images, libraries, courtyards, living spaces, and areas for worship. Its location near a route was not accidental. Travelers brought news, offerings, questions, and connections to other places. In return, a religious center could offer guidance, learning, hospitality, or simply a quiet place to stop. The Silk Roads were full of such spaces where movement and reflection met. Think of a distant town settling into evening, its market noise fading behind mud brick walls. Let the fact drift away at its own pace, leaving only stars, dark hills, and the feeling of distant travel. Fact 38. Dunhuang stood near a gateway between China and Central Asia. Dunhuang became famous because it lay near the edge of the Gansu corridor, close to routes leading toward the deserts and oasis towns of Central Asia. For travelers, it could feel like a threshold. Behind them were the settled lands of eastern China. Ahead lay long journeys through more difficult terrain. Dunhuang grew as a military, administrative, commercial, and religious center. Its location made it a place where people could gather supplies, hear news, and prepare for travel. In history, gateways matter because they teach travelers that one world is ending and another is beginning. Let the road curve gently away now, carrying the story onward at its own unhurried pace. Imagine a low conversation fading into silence as travelers prepare to sleep beside their packed goods. Fact 39. The Mogao Caves preserve a remarkable record of exchange. Near Dunhuang, the Mogao Caves contain murals, sculptures, and manuscripts created over many centuries. The site is famous not only for its beauty, but also for what it reveals about movement across Eurasia. The art includes local, Indian, Central Asian, and other influences shaped into new forms. The caves were places of devotion, artistic labor, and memory. They were not built in one moment by one group. They grew gradually as generations added their own contributions. The result is a quiet archive of faith and creativity beside one of the world's great travel corridors. Imagine a traveler looking up at familiar stars and feeling for a moment less far from home. Rest with the thought that the world can be large and connected at the same time, like a sky full of separate stars. Fact 40. Manuscripts can survive where climate is dry. Dry conditions in parts of Central Asia helped preserve texts, textiles, and other fragile materials that might have vanished elsewhere. This is why desert sites can feel so extraordinary to archaeologists. A scrap of paper, a painted banner, or a piece of cloth can remain hidden for centuries in a cave or abandoned building. These objects do not tell us everything, but they offer rare glimpses into the past. They remind us that history often survives by accident. A dry room, a sealed chamber, or a forgotten box can become a bridge between an ancient traveler and a modern reader. Rest with the idea that even a long journey is made from small, quiet steps. Picture a quiet road through an oasis garden where leaves move softly and the air feels cooler than the desert beyond. Fact 41. Silk Road's art often mixed familiar and unfamiliar elements. Artists along the routes encountered images from many regions: a decorative border, a mythical animal, a floral pattern, or a style of clothing could inspire new work far from its first home. Local artists did not simply copy what they saw. They chose what suited their own traditions and changed it. A motif could become more abstract, more colorful, more religious, or more useful for a different kind of object. This is why Silk Road's art feels alive. It records not only movement, but also imagination. It shows people responding creatively to the world arriving at their door. Picture a camel kneeling beside a camp, while someone loosens a strap with careful hands. Allow the story to pause here, like a caravan waiting for dawn before it begins the next careful stage. Fact 42. Music and dance crossed borders too. Travelers brought instruments, rhythms, performance styles, and songs with them. In Tang, China, for example, music and dance connected with Central Asian cultures became fashionable at court and in urban life. A musician might learn a melody from a traveler, adapt it to local instruments, and pass it onward. Unlike a heavy object, music can travel inside memory. It needs no camel, no ship, and no storage room once someone has learned it. Yet it still depends on people meeting. The Silk Roads carried sound as surely as they carried silk. Let the story breathe here, between one town and the next, between one voice and another. Imagine a traveler looking back, once at the lights of a town, then turning calmly toward the open road. Fact 43. Tang was a cosmopolitan capital. During the Tang dynasty, Chang'an, now Xi'an, was one of the great cities of the medieval world. Merchants, envoys, clerics, and travelers from many regions could be found there. Foreign languages, imported goods, new fashions, and religious communities formed part of the city's life. A large capital did not erase differences, but it created a place where people could encounter them closely. Chang'an shows how cities can become mirrors of faraway roads. Even someone who never left the city might see the wider world in a market stall, a piece of music, or a visitor's clothing. Imagine a river moving beside the road, carrying moonlight downstream without any effort at all. Let the distant route become a gentle background to your thoughts, wide, dark, and completely without urgency. Fact 44. Foreign communities helped cities stay connected. People from Central Asia, South Asia, West Asia, and other regions sometimes lived for long periods in distant cities. They worked as merchants, artisans, translators, entertainers, clerics, officials, and soldiers. These communities helped sustain connections between places because they knew more than one social world. They could explain local habits to newcomers and distant markets to local buyers. Their lives were not always easy, and their evidence is often incomplete. Still, They show that cultural exchange was not merely an event. It could become part of everyday life in a neighborhood, a workshop, or a household. Allow the details to become softer now, as though seen through the warm glow of a lantern. Picture a small oil lamp burning steadily inside a sheltered room, while the night wind passes outside. Fact 45. Persian artistic influence traveled widely. Persian and Sasanian artistic influenced patterns, metalwork, textiles, and decorative ideas across parts of Central Asia and China. Motifs such as pearl roundels, animals, and elegant plant forms could be reimagined in new materials and styles. These influences did not move in only one direction. Artists in different regions borrowed from each other over time. The story is less like a single source pouring outward and more like a conversations, continuing across generations. An object made in one place could invite a craftsperson elsewhere to see beauty in a new arrangement of shapes. Somewhere along the route, a door closes gently for the night, and the road becomes peaceful. For now, leave the maps folded and the animals resting. The next road can wait until another page of history. Fact 46. The Silk Roads carried many religions, not only one. Buddhism is strongly associated with the routes, but it was not alone. Zoroastrianism, Manichaeism, Christianity of the Church of the East, Judaism, Islam, and many local traditions all appeared in different communities along the Maritime network. Some people traveled for religious reasons. Others encountered new beliefs in a market town or through a neighbor. The result was not always harmony, and religions did not spread evenly. Still, the Silk Roads created many moments of contact. A city could contain shrines, texts, symbols, and stories from several traditions at once. Picture a map with no sharp edges, only many paths meeting and separating like threads. Imagine the dust settling around old footprints, preserving nothing sharply and yet leaving the path quietly visible. Fact 47. Zoroastrian communities were part of Central Asian life. Zoroastrianism had deep roots in Iranian cultural worlds and was present in parts of Central Asia connected with the Silk exchange. Its communities contributed to the religious diversity of oasis towns and trading centers. Fire, ritual, ethical thought, and sacred texts all held importance within Zoroastrian traditions, though practices varied across time and place. For travelers, encountering another religion could mean seeing unfamiliar architecture, hearing different prayers, or learning new ideas about the world. The Silk Roads made these encounters more likely, even when each community remained distinct. Let the dust settle, the animals rest, and the distant road wait quietly for morning. Let your mind travel only as far as it wishes. Then stop beside a peaceful camp beneath the stars. Fact 48. Manichaeism traveled far beyond its place of origin. Manichaeism began in the 3rd century CE in the Iranian world, and later spread across parts of West, Central, and East Asia. Its followers used texts, images, and missionary activity to sustain communities over long distances. Because Manichaean traditions valued teaching and transmission, travel networks helped them reach new places. Over time, the religion interacted with local languages and cultures in different ways. Its presence along the Silk Roads is another reminder that the routes were not just commercial. They were also paths of belief, debate, translation, and personal searching. Imagine a small courtyard where travelers speak in low voices before sleep. Picture a silent river carrying moonlight past an old trading town, moving onward without being asked. Fact 49. Christian communities of the Church of the East reached Central Asia and China. Christianity associated with the Church of the East spread through parts of West and Central Asia and reached Tang, China. Its communities used the languages and networks available to them, adapting to different cultural settings. The famous Xi'an stele records a Christian presence in China during the Tang period. Such evidence helps show how varied the religious map of the Silk Roads could be. A traveler in one city might encounter Buddhist images, Zoroastrian symbols, Islamic teaching, Christian writing, and local traditions within the same broad urban world. Take a slow breath and leave a little space around the fact, like open land around a caravan trail. Rest in the pause between places where the road is neither behind nor ahead, but simply quiet beneath the night. Fact 50. Islam became a major force in later Silk Roads history. From the 7th century onward, Islam spread across large parts of West and Central Asia through a mixture of trade, migration, teaching, state power, and local conversion. Muslim merchants, scholars, artisans, and travelers became important participants in many routes. Cities such as Samarkand, Bukhara, Merv, and others developed new roles within Islamic intellectual and commercial life. Islam did not replace all older traditions immediately, and local cultures continued to shape the way communities lived. The Silk Roads carried change slowly, through generations of contact rather than a single moment. Let the night sky widen over the old routes, holding every road in the same soft darkness. Imagine the caravan far away now, its lanterns small and warm, until they blend gently into the dark horizon. Fact 51. Jewish communities also belonged to the wider network. Jewish merchants and communities were present in various cities, connected by the Silk Roads and other Eurasian trade routes. Their histories remind us that the network included people with many different backgrounds and identities. A merchant community could maintain religious practices while living far from an ancestral homeland. It could also develop local traditions shaped by the place where it settled. The Silk Roads were never the possession of one empire, one faith, or one language. They were made from overlapping human worlds, each carrying its own memory and way of life. Let that thought settle for a moment, like dust returning gently to the ground after a caravan has passed. For a few seconds, imagine the road, empty again, with one faraway lantern holding its small circle of warmth against the dark. Fact 52. Pilgrims often traveled more slowly than merchants. A merchant might move when a market was favorable. A pilgrim might move according to a religious goal, stopping at monasteries, shrines, and libraries along the way. Pilgrims carried questions, donations, manuscripts, and stories. Their journeys could take years. They often depended on local hospitality and guidance. Because they wrote about what they saw, some pilgrims left especially valuable records. Their accounts may not always be complete, but they help modern readers imagine the roads as lived spaces. A pilgrimage turned travel into a form of learning, one careful step at a time. Picture the route growing quiet again, with only the soft clink of a harness. Somewhere beyond the firelight light. Let the scene become still, as though the travelers have stopped speaking, and only the soft breathing of the animals remains. Fact 53. Faxian's journey shows how far a determined traveler could go. The Chinese Buddhist monk, Faxian, traveled from China towards South Asia in the early 5th century CE in search of Buddhist texts and knowledge. His route led through difficult landscapes, including Central Asian regions and the Indian subcontinent. He later returned by sea. His surviving account gives a sense of the challenges and variety of long-distance travel in his time. Faxian did not move through an empty wilderness. He depended on monasteries, towns, boats, guides, and other people. His story shows how spiritual purpose could sustain a very long journey. Now allow the image to fade a little, leaving only a broad sky and a slow road beneath it. Picture the path continuing beyond sight, patient and pale beneath the moon, with no need for you to follow it any farther tonight. Fact 54. Xuanzang's travels became one of the best-known Silk Road stories. In the 7th century CE, the Chinese monk Xuanzang traveled westward toward India to study Buddhist teachings and collect texts. His journey crossed Central Asia and brought him into contact with many kingdoms and religious centers. After returning to China, he helped translate and interpret the materials he had gathered. His life became famous because it combined adventure, scholarship, faith, and endurance. Yet even his remarkable journey depended on ordinary help. Local rulers, interpreters, monks, donors, guides, and the hospitality of communities along the way. Take an easy breath and imagine the next traveler arriving at a distant gate before dawn. Rest beside this idea for a moment, like a traveler resting beside a wall after a long day of quiet, steady walking. Fact 55. The Indian Ocean was a second great highway of exchange. The maritime side of the Silk Roads depended on sailors who understood coasts, currents, winds, stars, and seasons. Ships moved between ports in East Africa, Arabia, Persia, India, Southeast Asia, and China. Sea routes could move goods in great volume, but they were not easy. Storms, shallow waters, changing winds, and piracy were risks. Still, the ocean connected distant shores with remarkable regularity. A harbour could become as important as an oasis, offering fresh water, warehouses, repairs, information, and the chance to wait for the right wind. Let the old road rest in your mind, not as a line to memorize, but as a path disappearing calmly into the distance. Imagine a gentle wind moving across the sand and carrying away every detail you do not need to remember before sleep. Fact 56. Monsoon winds helped make Indian Ocean sailing predictable. Sailors in the Indian Ocean learned to use seasonal monsoon winds. At different times of year, winds blew in patterns that could carry ships in one direction and later help them return. This knowledge did not remove danger, but it long-distance sailing more practical. A merchant or captain had to plan carefully. Leaving at the wrong time could mean waiting for months. The rhythm of the winds shaped business, travel, and daily life in port cities. In this way, the atmosphere itself became part of the commercial calendar. Somewhere in that world, a lamp is being covered against the wind, and a journey is beginning again. Somewhere beyond the next ridge, a small camp is settling down, and its distant fire is becoming only a warm point of light. Fact 57. Ports joined ocean trade to inland trade. A port was rarely just a place where ships arrived. It was a meeting point between sailors, merchants, customs officials, laborers, brokers, craftspeople, and inland traders. Goods from ships could be moved onto carts, animals, or riverboats. Inland products could be gathered, stored, and loaded for overseas travel. Ports also carried news. A sailor arriving from far away might bring word of prices, political changes, storms, or new opportunities. The Silk Roads were strongest, where different forms of travel could connect and support each other. Imagine the sound of footsteps becoming softer as the caravan moves farther away across the plain. Allow the old route to widen in your mind, peaceful and unhurried, with room for every traveler and every quiet pause. Fact 58. The Persian Gulf and Red Sea formed important western sea links. The Persian Gulf and the Red Sea connected Indian Ocean commerce to West Asian and Mediterranean worlds. Goods arriving by sea could travel onward through river systems, desert routes, and urban markets. These waters were part of a larger network that linked Africa, Arabia, Persia, India, and beyond. A single object might pass through several regions before reaching its final buyer. Thinking about the Gulf and Red Sea helps widen the picture. The Silk Roads were not only a story of China and Rome. They were a story of many connected centers. Let the horizon remain open and quiet, with no need to hurry toward whatever lies beyond it. Picture a folded blanket, a covered lamp, and a clear night sky, all waiting patiently beside the next stage of the journey. Fact 59. Rivers could be as useful as roads. Understood. Where rivers were navigable, they offered a way to move cargo that might be too heavy or awkward for a pack animal. Rivercraft could connect inland towns to ports, farms to cities, and local markets to broader routes. The speed and safety of river travel depended on seasons, water levels, and the kind of vessel available. Still, rivers often reduced the burden of overland transport. They also created fertile valleys where towns could grow. On the Silk Roads, a river was both a landscape feature and a moving pathway. Pause beside an imagined well, where animals drink slowly, and the water reflects a small piece of sky. Let the road grow softer now, like a line drawn in sand that the evening wind will slowly smooth away. Fact 60. Connections between Rome and Han China were indirect. It is tempting to imagine direct and regular contact between the Roman and Han worlds. In reality, the distance was vast, and many other peoples and states stood between them. Goods and ideas often moved through intermediaries. A Roman buyer might never meet a Chinese weaver. A Chinese court official might know of Western lands through reports rather than direct visitors. Yet, indirect connection can still be powerful. A fabric, a rumor, or a crafted object can reshape expectations even when the people at each end of the network never see each other. Picture a folded piece of cloth resting safely in a chest while the night grows cooler outside. Imagine the sound of a wooden gate closing gently as a caravan town becomes quiet for the night. Fact 61. Roman writers noticed silk even when they misunderstood its origin. Silk reached the Roman world and became associated with luxury and fascination. Roman writers sometimes complained about the cost of imported goods or treated silk as an exotic mystery. The fabric's route to the Mediterranean was often indirect, passing through many communities and markets. This uncertainty added to its allure. The silk could seem to come from the far edge of the known world. The Roman interest in silk shows how trade creates imagination as well as commerce. A distant product can become a symbol of a place people know mainly through stories. Allow the route to become still for a moment, as if everyone has paused to listen to the wind. Take a slow breath and picture cool water in a clay cup, off without hurry after a long stretch of road. Fact 62. Byzantium developed its own silk traditions. In the Byzantine world, silk became important for court ceremony, religious use, and elite dress. Over time, local silk production and weaving traditions developed, while artistic influences continued to move through trade and diplomacy. Craft. Byzantine textiles could themselves become prestigious goods in other regions. This is another reminder that the Silk Roads were not a one-way stream from east to west. Knowledge and luxury materials moved in many directions. A technology or artistic form could arrive, change, and then travel onward again in a new version. Think of a distant town settling into evening, its market noise fading behind mud brick walls. Let the fact drift away at its own pace, leaving only stars, dark hills, and the feeling of distant travel. Fact 63. Islamic cities became centers of learning and trade. As Islamic societies expanded across West and Central Asia, many cities became important centers of scholarship, craft, commerce, and translation. Libraries, markets, workshops, courts, and schools drew people from different backgrounds. Knowledge from Greek, Persian, Indian, and other traditions could be studied, translated, debated, and developed in new settings. Trade routes helped bring texts and people together, though learning also depended on institutions and local support. The Silk Roads help us see that intellectual life often grows where travel, language, and curiosity meet. Let the road curve gently away now, carrying the story onward at its own unhurried pace. Imagine a low conversation fading into silence as travelers prepare to sleep beside their packed goods. Fact 64. Political change could make one route safer and another route harder. Travel depended heavily on the states and communities along the way. A ruler who protected roads, controlled banditry, repaired bridges, or encouraged markets could make a route more attractive. War, taxation, border conflict, or local instability could send travelers elsewhere. Because of this, the map of trade was always changing. Roads that flourished in one century might decline in another. A town that was once busy could become quiet. The Silk Roads were not permanent structures. They were living networks, sensitive to the choices of people and the rise and fall of power. Imagine a traveler looking up at familiar stars and feeling, for a moment, less far from home. Rest with the thought that the world can be large and connected at the same time, like a sky full of separate stars. Fact 65. Caravan travel was patient work, not constant excitement. A journey by caravan involved many ordinary tasks. Packs had to be balanced. Animals had to be fed and checked. People had to cook, sleep, negotiate, and wait. A broken strap or sore foot could slow the whole group. The pace was often measured, not dramatic. Travelers watched the horizon and repeated familiar routines day after day. This steadiness is part of what makes the Silk Roads suitable for a sleepy story. Beneath the grand history were countless quiet moments. A rope being tied, a fire being lit, a kettle warming, and a camp settling under the night sky. Rest with the idea that even a long journey is made from small, quiet steps. Picture a quiet road through an oasis garden where leaves move softly and the air feels cooler than the desert beyond. Fact 66. Caravanserais offered shelter along some routes. Sod. A caravanserai was a roadside inn or enclosed stopping place used by travelers and animals in parts of the Islamic world and beyond. These places could provide a courtyard, storage, water, protection, and room to rest. Not every route had the same kind of shelter, but the idea was important. Long-distance travel required places where strangers could pause safely. A caravanserai turned the road into a sequence of manageable stages. It also encouraged conversation. Travelers could exchange news, compare prices, hear stories, and learn what might be waiting ahead. Picture a camel kneeling beside a camp, while someone loosens a strap with careful hands. Allow the story to pause here, like a caravan waiting for dawn before it begins the next careful stage. Fact 67. Markets were places of information as well as commerce. At a market, people came to buy and sell, but they also came to listen. What was a pass open? Had a ruler changed the tax? Were ships delayed by wind? Was there trouble on a certain road? News could be as valuable as goods. A merchant who knew when to leave or where to avoid danger had an advantage. The market, therefore, acted like an early communication network. 1. Its sounds may have been busy, but its purpose was deeply practical, to help people make decisions in an uncertain world. Let the story breathe here, between one town and the next, between one voice and another. Imagine a traveler looking back once at the lights of a town, then turning calmly toward the open road. Fact 68. Taxes and tolls shaped the cost of travel. Rulers often recognized that busy routes could bring revenue. They collected customs duties, tolls, or other payments from merchants passing through their territories. These charges could support governments, roads, guards, or local institutions, though they could also burden traders. A merchant had to include such costs when deciding where and when to travel. This meant that trade routes were never completely free spaces. They passed through lands governed by people with their own needs and ambitions. The price of a small object in a faraway market could reflect many quiet payments made along the way. Imagine a river moving beside the road, carrying moonlight downstream without any effort at all. Let the distant route become a gentle background to your thoughts. Wide, dark, and completely without urgency. Fact 69. Trust was one of the most valuable goods on the routes. A merchant might hand goods to a partner, extend credit, or rely on a promise made far from home. Such arrangements required trust. Family ties, community networks, shared languages, religious connections, written contracts, and repeated experience could all help build it. Trust did not remove risk, but it made exchange more possible. In a world where travel was slow, reputation mattered greatly. A person known for fair dealing could find more partners than someone known for breaking promises. The Silk Roads were built from roads and animals, but also from relationships. Allow the details to become softer now, as though seen through the warm glow of a lantern. Picture a small oil lamp burning steadily inside a sheltered room while the night wind passes outside. Fact 70. Local guides knew what maps could not show. Even when travelers had written directions or reports, local knowledge remained essential. A guide might know which well was reliable, which village welcomed strangers, where snow lingered, or how to avoid a washed-out path. Maps, when they existed, could not capture every changing detail of weather and ground. The best travel knowledge was often practical and local. It was carried in memory, stories, and experience. This is why the Silk Roads were never just lines on paper. They were routes understood through the eyes and feet of the people who moved along them. Somewhere along the route, a door closes gently for the night, and the road becomes peaceful. For now, leave the maps folded and the animals resting. The next road can wait until another page of history. Fact 71. The seasons set the pace of many journeys. Travelers had to consider heat, cold, rain, snow, river levels, pasture, and wind. A route that was pleasant in one season might become dangerous in another. High passes could close with snow. Desert crossings could be more difficult during extreme heat. Sea voyages depended on wind patterns. These limits meant that a journey often included waiting. Waiting for cooler weather. Waiting for animals to recover. Waiting for a caravan to gather. The history of the Silk Roads includes many pauses, and those pauses were not wasted time. They were part of traveling wisely. Picture a map with no sharp edges, only many paths meeting and separating like threads. Imagine the dust settling around old footprints, preserving nothing sharply, and yet leaving the path quietly visible. Fact 72. Night travel could be useful in hot regions. In some dry landscapes, travelers preferred to move during cooler hours. Moonlight, stars, and local knowledge could help guide a caravan when daytime heat was severe. Night travel had its own challenges, of course. Paths were harder to see, and the group had to stay together. Yet the dark could also bring relief. Imagine the sound of animals moving slowly over sand, while the sky turns deep and clear above them. The Silk Roads were not always traveled beneath bright sun. Sometimes the gentlest miles were walked beneath the quietest stars. Let the dust settle, the animals rest, and the distant road wait quietly for morning. Let your mind travel only as far as it wishes, then stop beside a peaceful camp beneath the stars. Fact 73. Disease could travel along connected routes. Movement brings opportunity, but it can also carry illness. Travelers, animals, goods, and ships connected communities that might otherwise have remained more separate. In some periods, diseases spread across long distances through overlapping commercial, military, and migration networks. The exact paths are often difficult to reconstruct, and it is too simple to blame one road or one group of people. Still, the Silk Roads remind us that connection has consequences. The same routes that carried beauty, knowledge, and food could also carry risks that communities had to face together. Imagine a small courtyard where travelers speak in low voices before sleeping. Picture a silent river carrying moonlight past an old trading town, moving onward without being asked. Fact 74. War could interrupt trade, but rarely stopped movement forever. Conflict could close a pass, damage a town, make a border dangerous, or change who controlled a market. Merchants often responded by waiting, rerouting, or working through new partners. Over long periods, trade networks adapted. Some routes weakened while others became more important. This resilience came from the fact that the Silk Roads were never one fragile highway. They were many possibilities. People continued to look for ways around obstacles because exchange brought practical benefits. The roads could bend, shrink, and reappear in new forms. Take a slow breath and leave a little space around the fact, like open land around a caravan trail. Rest in the pause between places where the road is neither behind nor ahead, but simply quiet beneath the night. Fact 75. Routes shifted when environments changed. Rivers move, water sources fail, deserts expand, and local agriculture changes. These environmental shifts could alter the practical value of a town or road. An oasis that once supported travelers might decline if its water system weakened. Another place might rise because a new route passed nearby. Archaeological ruins in dry regions sometimes show where life once flourished beside paths that no longer carry the same traffic. The Silk Roads teach that landscapes have histories too. The ground beneath a traveler's feet was never fixed forever. Let the night sky widen over the old routes, holding every road in the same soft darkness. Imagine the caravan far away now, its lanterns small and warm, until they blend gently into the dark horizon. Fact 76. The Mongol period increased long-distance contact in some regions. In the 13th and 14th centuries, Mongol rule connected large parts of Eurasia under related political systems. This did not make travel easy or peaceful everywhere, but it did create conditions in which certain long-distance movements became more possible. Envoys, merchants, artisans, religious figures, and travelers crossed wide areas that had once been divided by more separate powers. The phrase, Pax Mongolica, is sometimes used for this period of expanded connection, though it should not hide the violence of conquest that made it possible. History can contain both movement and suffering at the same time. Let that thought settle for a moment. Like dust returning gently to the ground after a caravan has passed. For a few seconds, imagine the road empty again, with one faraway lantern holding its small circle of warmth against the dark. Fact 77. Marco Polo became the best-known European traveler, linked to the routes. Marco Polo's name is often associated with the Silk Road, although he was only one traveler among many. His account of travels in Asia helped shape European imaginations about distant places and the Mongol world. Like all travel writing, his narrative must be read carefully. It reflects what he observed, what he heard, and the storytelling traditions of his time. Still, his fame shows the power of a journey turned into a book. A traveler's words can keep moving long after the traveler has stopped. Picture the route growing quiet again, with only the soft clink of a harness somewhere beyond the firelight. Let the scene become still, as though the travelers have stopped speaking, and only the soft breathing of the animals remains. Fact 78. Travel accounts are valuable, but they are not complete maps of reality. A traveler tends to notice what seems strange, impressive, beautiful, or useful. They may miss ordinary life. They may misunderstand language, exaggerate danger, or repeat stories told by others. For this reason, historians compare travel accounts with archaeology, local records, art, and other evidence. A written journey can be a window, but it is not the entire house. This gentle caution helps us approach the Silk Roads with curiosity rather than certainty. The past becomes richer when we allow it to remain complex. Now allow the image to fade a little, only a broad sky and a slow road beneath it. Picture the path continuing beyond sight, patient and pale beneath the moon, with no need for you to follow it any farther tonight. Fact 79. The Black Death moved through a connected Eurasian world. In the 14th century, plague devastated many communities across Eurasia and North Africa. Scholars have studied how trade, military movement, and human travel helped connect regions during this period. The history is painful and cannot be reduced to a simple story of a disease traveling down one road. Yet the pandemic reveals how closely linked distant societies could be. A network that carried silk and messages could also carry devastating consequences. It is a sobering reminder that connection asks communities to think not only about profit, but also about care and responsibility. Take an easy breath and imagine the next traveler arriving at a distant gate before dawn. Rest beside this idea for a moment, like a traveler resting beside a wall after a long day of quiet, steady walking. Fact 80. Overland trade changed after new sea routes expanded. From the late 15th century onward, European maritime routes to Asia expanded and changed patterns of global trade. This did not mean that overland exchange suddenly vanished. Central Asian routes, regional markets, pilgrimage paths, and local networks continued in many forms. But the balance of long-distance commerce shifted as ocean travel, colonial expansion, and new political powers changed the world. The Silk Roads did not end with one dramatic closing door. They changed, like rivers changing course. Their legacy remained in cities, crafts, languages, and memories. Let the old road rest in your mind, not as a line to memorize, but as a path, disappearing calmly into the distance. Imagine a gentle wind moving across the sand and carrying away every detail you do not need to remember before sleep. Fact 81. The Silk Roads continued beyond the medieval period in many forms. It is easy to place the Silk Roads inside a distant past and imagine them disappearing completely. But communities along these routes continued to trade, travel, migrate, and exchange ideas long after the most famous ancient periods. Roads were repaired, borders changed, railways arrived, and modern states reshaped the region. The old routes did not remain exactly the same, yet many of the connections endured. A marketplace, a festival, a textile pattern, or a family story can carry traces of older movements even when the caravans are gone. Somewhere in that world, a lamp is being covered against the wind, and a journey is beginning again. Somewhere beyond the next ridge, a small camp is settling down, and its distant fire is becoming only a warm point of light. Fact 82. 19th century explorers renewed outside interest in Silk Road sites. In the 19th and early 20th centuries, archaeologists, geographers, and explorers from several countries traveled through Central Asia and Northwest China in search of ancient cities, manuscripts, and art. Their expeditions brought attention to remarkable sites, but they also raised lasting questions about how objects were removed, collected, and displayed. Many artifacts ended up far from the places where they were found. Modern conversations about heritage ask who should care for such materials and how communities connected to these histories should be involved. The Silk Roads continue to teach us not only about the past, but about responsibility in the present. Imagine the sound of footsteps becoming softer as the caravan moves farther away across the plain. Allow the old route to widen in your mind, peaceful and unhurried, with room for every traveler and every quiet pause. Fact 83. Local communities played a crucial role in preserving and finding heritage. The rediscovery of Silk Road's materials was not only the work of famous foreign explorers. Local residents, guides, workers, scholars, and caretakers often knew landscapes and sites long before outsiders arrived. Their knowledge helped visitors find ruins, caves, and old settlements. Yet their roles were not always given equal attention in older histories. Today, a fuller understanding of archaeology tries to recognize the many people involved in preserving and interpreting heritage. The past does not belong only to the person who writes the first book about it. Let the horizon remain open and quiet, with no need to hurry toward whatever lies beyond it. Picture a folded blanket, a covered lamp, and a clear night sky, all waiting patiently beside the next stage of the journey. Fact 84. Archaeology gives the roots a material voice. A broken pot, a bead, a wooden tablet, a coin or a fragment of cloth can tell historians something about movement and exchange. Archaeologists study where objects were found, what materials they contain, how they were made, and what other items lay nearby. This careful work can reveal trade patterns that no written source mentions. It can also correct old assumptions. The Silk Roads are not remembered only in stories. They survive in the quiet evidence of things left behind by people who had no idea they were becoming part of history. Pause beside an imagined well, where animals drink slowly and the water reflects a small piece of sky. Let the road grow softer now, like a line drawn in sand that the evening wind will slowly smooth away. Fact 85. Desert preservation makes small objects especially important. At some Silk Road sites, dry air and sand protected everyday items that would normally decay. A child's shoe, a piece of paper, a wooden comb, or a scrap of food packaging can offer a glimpse of daily life. These objects may seem humble beside gold or silk, but they can be more intimate. They remind us that the roots were used by ordinary people with ordinary needs. Someone tied a sandal, someone wrote a note, someone packed a meal. The grand history becomes calmer and more human when we notice the small things. Picture a folded piece of cloth resting safely in a chest while the night grows cooler outside. Imagine the sound of a wooden gate closing gently as a caravan town becomes quiet for the night. Fact 86. Women were part of Silk Road's life, even when records mention them less often. Historical sources often focus on rulers, envoys, monks, and merchants, who were frequently men. But women were present in households, workshops, farms, religious communities, courts, and markets throughout the connected world of the Silk Roads. They made textiles, managed property, raised families, practiced crafts, traveled, taught, and took part in local economies in ways that varied widely by place and period. The evidence can be uneven, which means we must avoid pretending to know more than we do. Still, a realistic picture of the roots must include women's labor and lives. Allow the root to become still for a moment, as if everyone has paused to listen to the wind. Take a slow breath and picture cool water in a clay cup, offered without hurry after a long stretch of road. Fact 87. The roots also carried people who did not travel by choice. Long-distance networks included forms of coercion as well as voluntary movement. Enslaved people, captives, displaced artisans, and prisoners could be moved across regions by war, trade, or state power. This is an important part of the history. Even in a calm telling, the Silk Roads were not automatically peaceful, simply because they connected cultures. They reflected the unequal power of the societies that used them. Remembering this helps us avoid turning the past into a simple romance. Human connection can be generous, but it can also be shaped by force. Think of a distant town settling into evening, its market noise fading behind mud brick walls. Let the fact drift away at its own pace, leaving only stars, dark hills, and the feeling of distant travel. Fact 88. Exchange was not always equal. A powerful empire could demand tribute. A wealthy buyer could set the terms of trade. A local community might have to adapt to outsiders with more political or military power. The Silk Roads created opportunities, but those opportunities were not shared evenly. Some people gained wealth and influence, while others faced risk or loss. This does not erase the creativity of exchange. It simply makes the story more honest. When we admire a beautiful object from the roots, we can also ask whose labor made it possible and who had the power to move it. Let the road curve gently away now, carrying the story onward at its own unhurried pace. Imagine a low conversation fading into silence as travelers prepare to sleep beside their packed goods. Fact 89. Borrowing is not the same as copying. When ideas moved along the Silk Roads, they were usually changed by the people who received them. A religious text was translated. A pattern was adapted to a new fabric. A food was grown in new soil. A musical style was played with different instruments. This process is sometimes called cultural exchange, but it is more active than the frayed can sound. Communities made choices. They accepted some elements, changed others, and ignored many more. The result was not a flat, blended culture. It was a world of distinct traditions becoming more inventive through contact. Imagine a traveler looking up at familiar stars and feeling, for a moment, less far from home. Rest with the thought that the world can be large and connected at the same time, like a sky full of separate stars. Fact 90. The Silk Roads shaped shared cultural memory. Many places along the routes preserve stories of travelers, saints, merchants, rulers, artists, and local heroes. These stories may change over time, but they keep the memory of connection alive. A city may celebrate its old market, a craft community may maintain a pattern, or a family may tell of ancestors who came from another region. Cultural memory does not need to be perfectly exact to matter. It shows how people understand their place in a larger world. The Silk Roads remain meaningful because they are remembered as more than roads. Rest with the idea that even a long journey is made from small, quiet steps. Picture a quiet road through an oasis garden, where leaves move softly and the air feels cooler than the desert beyond. Fact 91. UNESCO recognizes parts of the network as shared heritage. Several routes, cities, monuments, and landscapes connected with the Silk Roads are now recognized through international heritage programs. This recognition reflects the fact that the network crosses modern borders. No single country can contain its whole history preserved. Preserving this heritage requires cooperation between many communities and institutions. It also encourages people to see their local site as part of a broader human story. A ruined watchtower, a cave temple, or an old city wall can become a reminder that distant places were once connected by regular movement and mutual curiosity. Node. Picture a camel kneeling beside a camp while someone loosens a strap with careful hands. Allow the story to pause here, like a caravan waiting for dawn before it begins the next careful stage. Fact 92. The Silk Roads are a lesson in interconnected history. The greatest lesson of the Silk Roads may be that no civilization develops in complete isolation. Communities create their own traditions, but they also learn through contact. They trade, argue, translate, borrow, adapt, and teach. The old roots make this visible on a grand scale. They show that history is not made only by kings and battles. It is also made by weavers, farmers, sailors, scribes, guides, cooks, animal handlers, and people who welcomed a stranger at the edge of town. The world has always been more connected than it first appears. Let the story breathe here, between one town and the next, between one voice and another. Imagine a traveler looking back once at the lights of a town, then turning calmly toward the open road. Fact 93. A single object could carry many histories at once. Imagine a small piece of silk found far from where its thread was first produced. Its history might include the mulberry leaves that fed the silkworms, the people who reeled and dyed the thread, the weaver who made the cloth, the merchant who bought it, the animals that carried it, the taxes paid along the way, and the family who finally used it. One object can contain a whole chain of human effort. This is why museum pieces and archaeological finds can feel so moving. They are small enough to hold, yet large enough to connect worlds. Imagine a river moving beside the road, carrying moonlight downstream without any effort at all. Let the distant route become a gentle background to your thoughts. Wide, dark, and completely without urgency. Fact 94. The roads were made by repetition. No single journey created the Silk Roads. They were made by repeated trips over many generations. A path became known because people used it again. A market became reliable because buyers returned. A language became useful because travelers kept hearing it. A town grew because water, security, and trade made it worth stopping there. History sometimes seems to move through sudden events, but the Silk Roads were built mostly through repetition. One caravan followed another. One letter answered another. One traveler learned from the footsteps of someone who had passed before. Allow the details to become softer now, as though seen through the warm glow of a lantern. Picture a small oil lamp burning steadily inside a sheltered room while the night wind passes outside. Fact 95. The most relaxing fact is that the routes were full of pauses. For every difficult pass and distant destination, there were long pauses. People waited for wind. They waited for daylight. They waited for a gate to open, a market to begin, an animal to recover, or a companion to arrive. These pauses were part of the journey, not interruptions to it. In a modern world that often rushes from one thing to the next, the Silk Roads offer a different rhythm. As progress could be slow, seasonal, and patient. A traveler could not command the weather or hurry the horizon. They had to move when the world allowed it. Somewhere along the route, a door closes gently for the night, and the road becomes peaceful. For now, leave the maps folded and the animals resting. The next road can wait until another page of history. Fact 96. The Silk Roads remind us that distance can be crossed gently. The routes were not gentle in every practical sense. Travel could be difficult and dangerous. But over centuries, people found ways to connect across extraordinary distances without erasing the places between them. They stopped in towns. They relied on local skills. They learned names for unfamiliar things. They carried a little of one world into another. This is the final quiet thought of the Silk Roads. The world can be vast, and still, people can build bridges through patience, exchange, and curiosity. A road becomes meaningful when someone chooses to meet another person along it. Picture a map with no sharp edges, only many paths meeting and separating like threads. Imagine the dust settling around old footprints, preserving nothing sharply, and yet leaving the path quietly visible. Fact 97. Scholars continue to refine what the label Silk Roads includes. The term Silk Roads is useful, but it should never become a rigid box. Researchers continue to ask which routes, ports, communities, and periods belong in the story. Some emphasize Central Asian overland travel. Others highlight maritime networks, steppe connections, African ports, or local routes that linked into larger systems. This ongoing discussion is healthy. It reminds us that the past is more complicated than a single map. The more carefully we look, the more voices and places we can hear within the old network. Let the dust settle, the animals rest, and the distant road wait quietly for morning. Let your mind travel only as far as it wishes. Then, stop beside a peaceful camp beneath the stars. Fact 98. The Silk Roads were not ancient versions of the modern world. The Silk Roads connected vast distances, but travel was slow, uncertain, and limited by season, landscape, and power. A message might take months. A traveler could disappear from home for years. Goods moved in stages, and knowledge changed as it passed between languages. Comparing the routes with modern global connections can be helpful, but the differences matter too. The people of the past lived with a different rhythm. Their world could be deeply connected and still feel immense, full of horizons that took a lifetime to cross. Imagine a small courtyard where travelers speak in low voices before sleep. Picture a silent river carrying moonlight past an old trading town, moving onward without being asked. Fact 99. Their legacy remains in living traditions. The Silk Roads are not preserved only in ruins and museum cases. Their traces remain in crafts, foods, music, languages, city plans, religious communities, and family histories across a wide part of the world. A woven pattern may recall an old artistic conversation day. A market may stand near a road used for centuries. A recipe may contain ingredients whose journeys began long ago. These living connections should be treated with respect because the roots are not simply a finished story. They are part of the cultural inheritance of many present-day communities. Take a slow breath and leave a little space around the fact, like open land around a caravan trail. Rest in the pause between places where the road is neither behind nor ahead, but simply quiet beneath the night. Fact 100. The Silk Roads show that history moves through ordinary people. It is easy to remember the names of famous travelers and powerful rulers, but the routes endured because ordinary people kept them alive. Someone fed the animals. Someone repaired the boat. Someone translated a message. Someone copied a page. Someone offered water to a stranger. Someone taught a child a pattern, a song, or a word from another place. Their names may be lost, yet their actions built a connected world. The Silk Roads are, above all, a story of patient human effort carried forward one small journey at a time. Let the night sky widen over the old roads, holding every road in the same soft darkness. Imagine the caravan far away now, its lanterns small and warm, until they blend gently into the dark horizon. And now our long journey along the Silk Roads begins to grow quiet. We have crossed deserts and mountain passes, stopped in oasis towns, listened to different languages, watched silk change hands, and followed ideas as they moved from one community to another. The people who used these routes did not know they were building a single story for the future. Most were simply working, traveling, praying, learning, trading, or trying to arrive safely at the next place. Yet their ordinary efforts created extraordinary connections. A pattern on cloth, a page of writing, a borrowed word, or a small object in a traveler's bag could travel farther than anyone expected. Over centuries, those movements shaped art, faith, science, and memory across a great part of the world. You do not need to keep following the road now. The caravan can continue without you. The camels can walk softly beneath the stars. The lamps in distant towns can stay lit. The night can hold the rest of the story. Thank you for spending this time with Histories to Fall Asleep. May your thoughts become still, may your breathing stay slow, and may you drift gently into a peaceful sleep. Good night.